Hello. Let's open with something that will get a laugh. I still have to load my Google Docs, so... right. Margaret Thatcher's in hell, and... have fucking whips. J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, world-famous transphobe and part-time mediocre detective fiction author, tweeted just before the new year. I actually had to rewrite the speech. She's always tweeting something. She quoted a tweet that said, "The majority of Americans agree with J.K. Rowling, there are only two genders." And she said she doesn't believe there are only two genders. She just wants to focus on the distinction between sex and gender. She called this a minor correction. Well, she doesn't seem particularly bothered that people are using her name to perpetuate more serious bigotry. The ILGA Europe, who previously ranked the UK as top for LGBT rights in its Equality Index, we are now 11th, if you were wondering, said in their review of 2021 that J.K. Rowling had materially contributed to attacks on LGBT rights in the UK. I think that's pretty clear to see, and I think it extends beyond the UK as well, with people around the world now using "I love JK" as a shorthand for "I hate trans women," a shorthand for "I think trans men are just misguided, brainwashed lesbians," a shorthand for "I think this trans nonsense has gone too far." When Rowling tweeted a questionable comparison between police recording the gender of perpetrators according to self-ID and George Orwell's 1984, always a good sign of intellectual curiosity and depth, in my opinion, her tweet was shared by right-wing personalities from anti-abortion, big smart debate boy Ben Shapiro, all the way to open white nationalist Richard Spencer. Shapiro and Spencer each have a history of using violent rhetoric which encourages stochastic fascist terror attacks. I'm trying here to highlight how people use Rowling to push more extreme bigotry, how more extreme and dangerous bigots use her to further their reactionary goals. Last year, a Republican senator quoted her while voting down LGBT equality legislation in the Senate. But I'm not here to talk about J.K. Rowling. I actually don't care very much about J.K. Rowling, believe it or not. Even if I did, she is in the TERF career death spiral now, with public figures distancing themselves from her over her bigotry and her continued campaigning against the rights of one of the most vulnerable and marginalized minorities in our society. One is almost tempted to imagine Joanne haunted by the spectre of Graham Linehan in her Scottish castle, the ghost of TERF Christmas yet to come. No, I'm not concerned by J.K. Rowling. I am concerned by institutions like the BBC, the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, other so-called journalistic institutions which use the cloak of journalism to draw everyone's attention to the bigotry of people like Rowling. A study by Paul Baker of Lancaster University found that between 2018 and 2019, the British press released in total 6,400 articles about trans people. We're flattered, really. About half the articles refer to incidents of transphobia using words like alleged or supposed. 15% put transphobia in quotes. Cute. There were hundreds of articles describing trans people as aggressive, offended, demanding, threatening, militant, and bullying. And 151 mentions of the transgender lobby? Baker goes on to say that the reporting closely resembles the reporting he studied that Muslims faced in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks, that feminists faced in the 1990s. I would go on further to compare it to the coverage of gay people under Margaret Thatcher. God rest her soul. And in my last speech, I examined the similarities to reporting around the Hillsborough disaster. In 2020, just the Sunday Times alone released nearly an article every single day about trans people. Doesn't it feel like you're being blasted by a constant stream of gibberish and nonsense and thin grey gruel all the time? That's the point. It's a tactic called fire hosing in which the media overwhelm us with so much nonsense and misinformation and broadly dishonest reporting that we couldn't possibly have the time to sift through it all and refute it. When J.K. Rowling said that A man who has no intention of getting hormones or therapy can access women's spaces. The BBC reported it uncritically. Pink News called her out for misrepresenting the state of medical gatekeeping in the UK, and Channel 4 were quick to fact-check Pink News and tell them that J.K. Rowling hadn't technically said anything factually wrong. From there, we could get into a tedious discussion of how dangerous predators wouldn't really be deterred by laws around gender identity if they wanted to go into women's spaces, and how J.K. Rowling seems to think that trans women show their gender recognition certificates when they go to pee, and so on and so on. And you see how we'd be tricked into having a conversation entirely on their terms, tricked into wasting our time? I can see plenty of fact-checking, but nowhere I look can I see any critical analysis of what the media says, why it says what it says, and why it says what it says when it says it. So welcome to my speech. We're going to do some critical media analysis. Yay! Woo! Yay! Last year in August, we protested outside Downing Street and explained in no uncertain terms that trans people face an exterminationist project from bigots in power, and that there is a human rights crisis for trans people in our country right now. The mainstream media didn't even remotely touch it. We know they were aware of it. We know some journalists. We know they knew about it. They didn't report on it at all. The BBC are happy to report on J.K. Rowling's tweets. They're happy to regurgitate the vile lies of hate groups, but their commitment to impartiality doesn't extend as far as showing the speeches that we gave last year, talking about the people that we've lost to suicide, the years and years of struggling against the system that wants us dead, and the true human reality of trans lives. What the media chooses to cover and what it chooses to ignore is incredibly telling. After I gave my speech, it transpired there had been a little fascist creep in the audience who was taking videos and pictures upskirting me on stage to send to fascist collaborator Andy Ngo, who shared it with his audience of nearly 1 million people. Andy Ngo is a far-right journalist who sends the names of anti-fascist activists to known neo-Nazi terrorist groups such as Atomwaffen. These upskirt photos were more coverage than our protest got from the entire British media. My speech, for those unaware, was about the way that the media lie and manipulate the public into fighting against our own best interests. I got sympathy from many for the harassment I faced, but still, people weren't engaging with what the speech had been about. Eventually, I was interviewed by Vice, an American publication, about the harassment, and my one request was that they include a link to the speech, because no one was talking about it. They were only talking about the harassment. I had to ask Vice to include it because I made a whole speech about the corruption of the British media and how they manipulate us, and all anyone was talking about was my underwear. Anyone aware of the basic facts here can see this as what it is: bog standard bigoted harassment and misogyny. But institutions like this one have somewhat of a vested interest in keeping people as far away from the facts as possible. Gendered Intelligence and the Good Law Project are now organising to sue the government to end the NHS medical discrimination that trans people face, which is fantastic. But mark my words, they are going to ramp up their attacks on trans people to distract from it as much as possible. The nonsense, the gibberish, the thin grey gruel is going to get worse before it gets better. I am sure that at this protest today we will hear the details of Caroline Lowbridge's article, "We're being pressured into sex by some trans women," many times. And likewise the story of how Lily Cade, a cis lesbian interviewed for the article, was a known serial rapist that Lowbridge chose to interview despite another interviewee who was cut from the piece telling her that Lily Cade was such. Or how Cade used the platform she was given to publish a document calling for the genocide of trans women only 2 days later. I won't hash out all the details again here. The biggest journalistic institution in the country I have lived in almost my entire life published an article calling people like me rapists, associating our basic inherent characteristics with rape. The article's only named source was herself a serial rapist. The author deemed this attack on trans women more important than the trivial, unimportant, tiny information that her only named source was herself a rapist. The surreality of this experience tests my descriptive power, and I write for a living. Seeing this article, I broke down in tears. This is the culmination of daily, constant attacks that people like me face. Interrogation of our lives, speculation about our genitals, guessing over whether we are a threat to others. It never stops. It is constant. The BBC published an article platforming a serial rapist who used that platform that they gave her to write a genocidal manifesto calling for the execution of trans women, the lynching of trans women in the public eye, and the gang rape of the mother of a trans child. The BBC published that article calling trans women rapists when the BBC, it is a known fact, spent decades covering for the vile actions of men like Jimmy Savile. Doesn't it feel like you're being blasted with their thin grey gruel all the time? It's a distraction, while our government slips in terrifying authoritarian policies. Our government right now is organizing to strip us of our right to protest. They're pushing through bills that would take away people's passports for drug offenses and strip people of their citizenship without warning or notice. This country is rapidly sliding into becoming a police state. And institutions like this one are publishing articles framing trans women as a threat to the safety of cis women. I know who is a threat to the safety of women because I know who killed Sarah Everard. The BBC, the Beeb, gave J.K. Rowling an award for her willingness to stand up to us scary transgenders. They said it was for the defense of free speech. I say it was an award for producing their thin grey gruel for them. They would love if I spent this whole speech talking about J.K. Rowling. They would love for us to spin our wheels, focusing on individual bigots. They might even give me an award if I could give an impassioned enough defense of transhumanity and trans rights and freedom and against the same people they already gave awards to. So, at the risk of repeating myself, if there are any journalists around here who are interested in the truth, I have some news you might want to report. We're bringing the fight to you now. We see you. You don't get to be invisible anymore. We see you, we see your nonsense for the distraction that it is, and you aren't going to waste our time anymore. If the BBC or Channel 4 or anyone working there or any other major journalistic institution wants to break this cycle of pathetic, craven pandering to the ruling class, I ask of you what I asked of Vice: share this speech in full. Share our speeches in full. If you don't, you're cowards. But that's okay, I already knew you were cowards. But if you do, well, we'll see. To be clear, I have nothing but respect for journalists who speak truth to power, and I have nothing but contempt for institutions like this one that seek to divide and pacify people and distract from the inhuman cruelty of our government. So, I'll speak now to the people the BBC will not show my speech to. If you would, please share this to them yourselves. If you would like, tell them what I have to say in your own words. Ahem. They want you to see the people all around you as dangerous criminals so they can do anything they want to all of us together. They work hard at telling you that trans people aren't ordinary working class people. We're all pink-haired, university-educated communists, am I right? Because they want you to see us as not having any interests in common. But the truth is, we have more in common with one another than we could possibly ever have with the ruling class or their media stooges. I know that you're tired of their gibberish, of their nonsense, of their thin grey gruel. I know you don't feel seen or heard or represented by the media. I know you don't feel like they speak for you. We don't feel like they speak for us either, but this isn't a tug of war between us over whose side gets represented. Everyone feels like the media aren't representing them because their job, their real job, the one they really do for the people they really work for, the ruling class of this country, is to make you feel like they're siding with me and make me feel like they're siding with you. When in reality, they're on the side of the politicians, the big businesses, the side of power, against the side of the people, against the truth and against reality. They don't serve you, they don't serve me, they serve power. I don't want you to learn complicated gender theories or finicky rules to interact with me. I just want you to treat me with basic human decency and respect. And you know what? When I meet people in real life, that's exactly what they do, and it's always fine. Somehow, nonetheless, people come away with the impression that trans people are easily offended, socially domineering, quick to judge people for getting unspoken rules wrong. That is a picture of me the media wants you to have. All I want you to know about trans people is how wondrous the experience is of finding the person that you were always supposed to be and becoming them. I want you to know about trans joy. I want you to know about trans happiness. I want you to know how much better it gets for trans people when all of the barriers are down and we can just be ourselves. I want you to be happy for us, so that when someone in your life comes out as trans, and believe me, they will, you can say what we always say. Good for them. I'm so happy for you. Don't they look happier every single day? I'm so glad that you're you, and I wouldn't want you to be anybody else or have to pretend to be anybody else anymore. Share this speech in full. Share our speeches in full. Join me in no longer accepting their nonsense, their gibberish, their thin grey gruel. Join me in understanding exactly what its purpose is and saying to these institutions who want to remain invisible, we see you. And once we can reject their nonsense and see what really matters here, they can't distract us anymore. They can't make us fight each other anymore. Once we can see what they're doing and who they're doing it for and what it really is, we can finally work together to make a society that works for the many and not just for the few. Thank you. My partner Natalie would like to make a short remark.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm Sophie's partner. I had to say something about the Caroline Lowbridge article in particular. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was there crying with Sophie when we read the Caroline Lowbridge article. Any woman who loves women, anyone who calls himself a feminist, should be horrified and disgusted at that article. Middle-class transphobic bigots like Caroline see women who love women as pure vestiges of virginity to be protected from spoilage by male influence. They frame us as brainwashed and in need of their protection for loving trans women. They are paternalistic, they are misogynistic and possessive of our lives and our bodies, our choices over who we love. This is hideously familiar. Women and children are always weaponized to fearmonger and drive violence against minorities. They don't get to do it in my name. We are not your fucking virgins. It's my body and it's my fucking choice. Fuck you, Caroline Lowbridge.